On the lines, Winston Shrout. Hey, he is come back from down under to start a new webinar coming up next Saturday, March the 8th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. It is called Commercial Consciousness, Breaking the Mind Control. Mr. Shrout, always a pleasure to have you on KPFK, sir. Welcome back.
Well, it's always good to talk to you. You're always so happy and bubbly. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Well, you always are coming with the good news, and I just want to thank you for being on the Army of the Light, the Army of goodness, and showing that human beings have such amazing capacity that we can take care and work with all the different dimensions and elements and spiritual ones to do what's right for Earth. And I just really want to...
I'll just remind you that I'm just a private in that Army. I'm a boots-on-the-ground kind of guy. So.
Well, thank you for taking up that walk, sir.
Somebody has to do it.
Hey, and for encouraging so many others to embrace their power. Now, this seminar, I think, is so beautifully timed and so immaculately important because you're talking about breaking the mind control. Because what I found in a lot of the left movements, that people kind of get stuck. They really want to move ahead, but then they are really held back by a lot of sociological neurosis, a lot of isms that make it ineffectual for them to work in groups, to walk in the same direction, saying the same thing. Tell us about how you are approaching and breaking down commercial consciousness and breaking mind control.
Well, what I intend to do first is to expose perhaps the many different elements, that have controlled people, and so forth. And so once people are able to identify the attackers, then certainly we can talk about avoiding those attacks, perhaps correcting some of the difficulties that have come upon people. And then actually the whole gist of Solutions in Commerce has been to enlighten and to awaken people and provide solutions, to some of the things. One of the things I've noticed over the last couple of years, there's been a great deal of conversation about ascension or uplifting and so forth like that, which is good in and of itself. But then once you become enlightened, what do you do? So that's one of the reasons why we've done the many seminars over the years we've done, is to not only to point out the difficulties, but also to offer solutions in commerce so that people can rid themselves of a lot of the, commercial karma that people seem to suffer with.
What is the disjunction, sir, between what people are able to learn at your seminars, etc., and then bringing it into practice? That seems to be when the mind control really jumps in, the doubt, the self-sabotage from people engaging in their power. How do we heal that?
Well, it takes some effort on the part of a lot of people. Certainly, well, for instance, let me just read a few statistics here that might be interesting to you. I got about 3 pages of statistics, but I think you'll get the gist of it if I just go over, let's say, the first 4. Number 1, it says an outstanding 70 million Americans are taking legal mind-altering drugs right now. That's 70 million people.
Wow.
Number 2, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, doctors wrote more than 250 million prescriptions for antidepressants during 2010.
Wow.
Item number 3, according to the study conducted by the Mayo Clinic, nearly 70% of all Americans are on at least one prescription drug. An astounding 20% of all Americans are on at least 5 prescription drugs. Item number 4. Well, it just goes on and on like this. Now, they didn't even address the fluoride in the water now, did they? Or the chemtrails or anything else.
Oh, that's old news now.
It's old news. But certainly, one of the main things I think a lot of people are suffering with is the chemical imbalance caused, by this prescription industry.
Yes.
One of the things I studied years ago when I was at the university was psychology, and which is interesting to me. And so back in those days, back in the 70s, we studied, the various things. I learned certain terms, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I got out of it and away from it for a very long time. And then from time to time, I would hear somebody say something about some kind of new mental disease. They'd say, bipolar. I kept hearing bipolar. I kept thinking, I don't remember anything about that. Or they'd name something else, And I got to think about this. Well, I kept thinking, why were they relabeling things that we had talked about in the 70s, using certain terms? And then I found out the reason why was so they could prescribe brand new drugs.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think the psychiatrists and that industry about every week or so they go through the list of words, change them all because they got new drugs coming out, and and so the whole world of psychology and psychiatry has changed to fit the prescription drug industry.
Well, it's so interesting. I remember when they came out with that shaky leg syndrome. Restless leg, whatever that was.
I mean, what kind of prescription would they give to Elvis to cure his problem?
Exactly.
I mean, Elvis changed the whole planet, man, with his shaky leg. Now, I don't know what they would prescribe for that poor fella, but anyway, you see the ridiculousness of it all.
So, how? What steps? Individually, what is the first thing you would tell a person or suggest if they wanted to break their mind control? If they became conscious and understanding, what internally is going, how does a person start the process?
Well, I would think first of all, I'm not a herbalist or naturopath kind of a guy. I mean, I just use practical home things myself, but certainly, if you're using antidepressants, if you're using psychotropic drugs and so forth, you need to be very careful of those things. Probably, you might want to investigate other alternative, if you really have those problems. if you're going to a psychiatrist, I strongly suspect that you may or may not have those problems. Anyway, their solution is to prescribe them to you. I would be very careful about those things. Certainly, if people will make the effort to have a healthy diet and try to remove some of these chemicals that are constantly being forced down your throat, I think you would probably be a whole lot better off. And then, if you can get your body cleaned up, and there's a lot of good ways to clean yourself up physically, get rid of the chemicals, and so forth, and then start looking at how you think, because people are seriously under mind control. I'll give you one example that happened to me, and I still haven't gotten broken free from it.
Yes, sir.
And that was Marine Corps boot camp. And so, hey, it was actually devastating. And that is one of the hardest things to break. I'll give you an example of it. When we were in boot camp, I mean, this is during the Vietnam era now I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
And we were marched around, running around, all that kind of stuff. And the drill instructors was having the recruits say, in cadence, that they would say, kill, rape, eat burned babies.
What?
I'm not kidding you. And I couldn't stomach that, so I just moved my mouth like I was saying it, but I sure the heck wasn't going to say something like that. But imagine the effect that had on 18 and 19-year-old boys that were headed for Vietnam. Why do you think we had those atrocities there? because it was drilled into their mind to think that. And so, that's devastating. But anyway, just the whole Marine Corps boot camp scenario and so forth was devastating to young people. They were put totally under mind control, so forth. And that's been the hardest thing in my life to break, even harder than religious dogma training.
Yes.
And so, people that have experienced those kind of circumstances and so forth, you have to recognize them for what they are, and learn to get your mind straight, because we're we're in a society of just about total mind control. Probably the biggest problem is the educational system, where like I say, when my parents went to school, I mean, they learned by a different system than when I was in school, and then school children now are even learning new systems and so forth. Now, when I was at the university studying psychology, they taught me the technique of how you can completely use mind control upon students and so forth. It pretty much turned me off. I went to college with the idea I was going to be studying psychoanalysis, and I got into behavior and learning theory and all the rest of that garbage real quick. And so I was pretty much turned. When I graduated, I just left, never looked back. I said that's the biggest waste of 4 years I can ever imagine. But in any event, in our education system, children are not being educated; they're being socialized.
Interesting. Really, now, wow, that's wonderful, Winston.
Well, it's the best part is the huge movement at this point towards homeschooling, home education, and some of those private opportunities for children to be taught without that influence of socialization being put upon them.
And it's amazing that once again, we talk about personal responsibility, how the state has taken over and stepped in for the family, for the parents. Anything that goes wrong, we look to the state. And how amazing it is now that parents, are stepping in, redirecting and
absolutely.
But wow, how draining. I mean, really, how sad it is to be so overworked. I mean, it's, you have to go to and work like pigeons for your scraps to be able to pay your bills. And then also, do your own, almost your own farming, own education. Wow. I hope this new system that's coming in means that there is going to be a more communal sharing in these tasks, and not the usual hoarding by those psychopaths in government or in some of these places of responsibility.
We've turned the corner on all this. There's no going back.
Yeah,
we're only going forward, and the main thing is we can't go backwards. The Earth itself is moving into new energies. The vibrational frequencies, the harmonics of the planet, have changed, and we must change with them. We cannot go back at our own peril. And we can't stay where we were either. We have to awake. We have to become, somewhat compliant with these new paradigms that the Earth is demonstrating to us, or else we simply can't stay here.
And that is going to be a subject of Winston Shrout's upcoming webinar on March 8th. That is Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific Standard Time. Commercial consciousness, breaking the mind control. You guys know what to do. www.WSSICWinstonShroutSolutionsInCommerce.com. Go there. All the contact information is there. Subscribe early. Be a part of this virtual classroom. Be able to interact with Winston, ask questions, etc. Because this is really the key. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need new drivers, and like you said, the planet is moving into a whole perspective that wants to celebrate your humanness, not human being, not like you're being human, but you are human, the most precious, incredible, incarnated, lovelies in the planet, and it is your time. It's the good time right now. So jump on that good train and join Winston in finding all the ways that there are little elements of self-sabotage that you've just got to kick to the curb. It is that important. Commercial consciousness, breaking the mind control. I love, Winston, how you are putting these two words together. Commercial consciousness.
Sure.
Talk about that.
Well, we need a few key words or buzzwords, so that people have an idea about what some of these things are. And let me make this comment. One of the things that I observed early on as I started to do seminars and get out into the public and talk to people and so forth was that, for instance, after a seminar or something like that, people come up to me and tell me how much better they felt. Mm-hmm. I said, really? And they were talking about feeling physically better.
Yes.
Well, I analyzed that, and what I came up with was that people who are under a great deal of stress, that stress will actually block their immune system. And if you can remove that stress, their immune system kicks back in, and they do feel better. Yes. And so it's not just psychological, but it's also physical. And so if your immune system is operating below par because of stress, if we remove that stress, then the immune system kicks back in, and so people immediately, feel better from that, aside from the psychological things.
Well, for one, I know how I feel, after coming off of this conversations with you and going to your webinars. It's like, ta-da! It's like, wee! But the thing that you're highlighting in your upcoming webinar is that once we get outside the sphere of your influence, oh, my God, here comes all of these negative, blanket of garbage, that comes back in. And I always am so conscious of seeing how my elated self starts to be picked at. And I start seeing these old things, old habits, old thoughts come up because of these prompters, because of, like you were talking about, just from a life, how you have these little bugs and neurosis and training that's been put in. And it's so interesting to see how it comes back. We just have to have you 24/7, Winston. There just has to be a revolving Winston. We always get to check in, et cetera, so that we get to keep you present. And so a commercial consciousness, when you said after you become enlightened, what do? What is it that we get to look forward to? People say that heaven is boring. I don't think heaven's going to be boring at all. I think we're...
Not if I'm there.
That's right.
We're going to have a good old time.
That's what I'm saying.
Get out the guitars, the banjos, and whatnot, and we'll have a hoedown.
I'm telling you. A hoedown for centuries, and I think we deserve it.
Well, yeah, that's right. I think, too, that, speaking of, the commercial things that we have shown people, basically it amounts to removing what we would call commercial karma, and that is dealing with debt.
Yes.
And so once we can remove that commercial karma, then we can work on psychological karma. That's up to individual people and so forth. But key to commercial redemption has to do with forgiveness of debt. I mean, it goes right back to what Jesus said, forgive us this day our debts as we forgive our debtors. And so when we're looking for redemption from debt and all these kind of things, we have to be careful that we learn to forgive others as well. Now, one of the keys to removing the element of karma, as people call it, is learning how to forgive yourself.
Thank you.
We can forgive. I've seen a lot of people forgive others, just instantaneously. Just forgive people around them. But then a lot of the times they're not aware, or perhaps hesitant to learn to forgive themselves. And so people just need to bundle up all their cares and woes, send them back to source, send them back to where they can be dealt with. And I think that people will break out of the psychological and physical bondage, as they start to apply those principles.
Well, I think it's so amazing that just for myself, when I did something like dumb, oh my God, I could think about it and it becomes alive as if it happened just yesterday with the shame, embarrassment, whatever. But overall, I do a lot of good things that I guess, forget or take for granted. And I think most people are doing immaculate, beautiful things on a day-in-and-day basis that goes unrecognized. And instead of the little shameful things, the little thoughts are amped up on steroids. And I just think it's part of like that forgiveness principle that you're talking about. It's like, you know what, start just amping up how really wonderful, how lovely, how amazing people are, because it's just and I mean, and in accordance. I mean, why not? If we're going to amp up what's wrong and what we did wrong and all this stuff, we'll flip that script. And, really start recognizing those God-given gifts and things.
Yeah, I think, people should be not so much worried about what's happening in the big world and whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of, shock commentators and people, the world's coming to an end, the economy's going to fail, the sky's going to fall in on top of Chicken Little and whatnot. But, the really big problems are handled. And people just have to have confidence in those who have the ability to resolve some of those problems. Most of the problems actually have been resolved. We're just right now in the mop-up stage. And so people ought to have confidence, first off, in themselves, and then, when they look around in society, the financial community, the politics, the governments, all those kind of things, just know this, that those things are in a correction state. And no more of this foolishness. And so we're just basically in the mop-up stage of some of those problems, and people ought not to be worried about those things. The sky is not falling in.
And it is a latch-ditch effort of those folks that have divorced themselves from source, or their source actually is a vacuous black hole.
It's exactly how you would think a psychopath would act.
Exactly. Bloodletting, psychopaths. And they are showing themselves. But coming up on March 8th, from 10 a.m. to 12:30, and March 8th is next Saturday, darlings, Commercial Consciousness, breaking the mind control. So important right now. Because the media, once again, like Winston is pointing out, is talking about the sky falling, is talking about the agitations of nuclear war and all of this kind of garbage. But behind the scenes, such good things are happening.
Absolutely.
Such good things. And so it is so important to join Winston so that you will start clearing out the controls, the neurosis that gravitates your energy system towards fear.
Yep.
And getting into that confidence and love.
Absolutely.
And so, Winston, coming up March 8th, 10 a.m. To 12:30, it is going to be an amazing webinar. And what do you want folks to take away from that webinar?
I want them to take away the resolve within themselves to become enlightened, to go into their self-realization, and so forth, and not be controlled by a bunch of stupid psychopaths, that can only lead them to destruction and unhappiness.